Welcome to Giuffre Epstein Files. In the broader context of legal actions connected to Virginia Giuffre, her court filings occupy a distinct and frequently referenced position. These documents are not standalone narratives, they are part of a structured legal process, created within specific cases and for defined legal purposes. To understand their significance, it is important to begin with what filings actually are. Legal filings are formal documents submitted to a court. They can include complaints, responses, motions, affidavits, and supporting materials. Each filing is designed to present information, assert claims, or respond to legal arguments within the framework of a case. In this context, the filings associated with Virginia Giuffre were created as part of civil litigation, rather than criminal prosecution. This distinction matters. Civil cases focus on claims between parties, often involving allegations, defenses, and requests for legal remedies. The filings within such cases are structured to support those claims, not to independently determine criminal guilt. Another key element is purpose. Each filing is created for a specific reason: to present allegations, to respond to opposing arguments, to introduce supporting material, to request action from the court. This means that the content is intentional and targeted, not comprehensive. The filings do not attempt to document every detail related to a broader situation. Instead, they focus on what is necessary to support the legal position being advanced at that stage of the case. There is also the issue of context. Individual filings are part of a larger sequence. A complaint may be followed by responses, motions, and additional submissions. Understanding any single document requires recognizing its place within that sequence. Another important factor is structure. Filings are written within legal conventions. They include formal language, references to evidence, and specific formatting requirements. This structure influences how information is presented and how it should be interpreted. It is also critical to distinguish between assertion and adjudication. Filings may contain allegations, descriptions, or references to events. However, the presence of these elements in a filing does not mean they have been proven or confirmed by the court. They represent what is being presented for consideration, not necessarily what has been established as fact. There is also the matter of supporting materials. Filings often include or reference exhibits, such as communications, records, or testimony excerpts. These materials are used to provide context or support, but they must be evaluated within the legal process. Understanding these elements leads to a clear conclusion. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre are not isolated documents, they are components of a structured legal process, shaped by rules, purpose, and context. They provide access to what was presented in court, but they must be read with an awareness of their function, limitations, and position within the broader case. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre did not appear all at once. They emerged within specific legal cases, each with its own structure, timeline, and procedural context. Understanding these filings requires looking at how they entered the legal system. In civil litigation, a case typically begins with a complaint, a formal document outlining allegations and claims. This initial filing sets the scope of the case, defining what issues the court is being asked to consider. From there, the process expands. Opposing parties submit responses, which may challenge the claims, provide alternative interpretations, or raise legal defenses. These responses are followed by additional filings, including motions, replies, and supporting documents. This creates a progressive record. Each filing builds on the previous ones, forming a sequence of arguments and counter-arguments. The filings connected to Virginia Giuffre follow this same pattern, developing over time rather than appearing as a single, unified account. Another important element is case segmentation. The filings are not confined to one legal action. They are associated with multiple proceedings, each addressing different legal questions. This means that the same individual may appear in different contexts, depending on the scope of each case. As a result, the filings must be understood within their specific case framework. A statement or reference in one case may serve a different purpose in another. Without recognizing these distinctions, it is easy to misinterpret how the information fits into the broader record. There is also the role of procedural stages. Filings are produced at different points in a case. Early-stage filings establish claims and defenses. Mid-stage filings focus on evidence and legal arguments. Later filings address rulings, motions, or resolutions. Each stage influences the type of information presented. This means that the content of a filing is shaped not only by its purpose, but also by when it appears in the process. Another factor is document expansion. As cases progress, filings often become more detailed. Early documents may outline general claims, while later filings introduce specific references, supporting materials, or clarifications. This creates a layered narrative. Information is not presented all at once, it is developed over time through successive filings. There is also the issue of interconnected cases. Some filings may reference or rely on material from other legal actions. This creates links between different case records, further complicating how the information is structured. Understanding this interconnectedness is essential. It shows that the filings are part of a network of legal documents, not a single, isolated source. Another key point is judicial oversight. Each filing is subject to review by the court. Judges determine how filings are accepted, limited, or acted upon. This oversight shapes what becomes part of the official record. This reinforces a central idea. The filings are not just written, they are processed, reviewed, and positioned within a legal framework. In summary, the filings associated with Virginia Giuffre emerged through a structured, multi-stage process, spanning multiple cases and procedural phases. They reflect the development of legal arguments over time, shaped by the rules and boundaries of the court system. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre are composed of multiple types of legal content, each serving a different function within the case. To understand their significance, it is essential to examine what these documents actually include, and how that content should be interpreted. At their core, the filings contain structured legal assertions. In civil cases, filings often present allegations, descriptions of events, and claims made by one party against another. These are written in formal legal language and organized to support a specific argument. However, it is important to emphasize, these assertions represent positions within a legal dispute, not final determinations of fact. Another major component is narrative description. Filings frequently include detailed accounts of timelines, interactions, and sequences of events. These narratives are designed to provide context and explain how the claims are connected. But like all legal narratives, they are constructed for a purpose, to support the argument being made. There are also references to evidence. Filings may cite or attach supporting materials such as emails or communications, travel or logistical records, financial documents, excerpts from testimony or depositions. These materials are used to reinforce the claims presented, but their meaning depends on how they are interpreted and evaluated within the case. Another important category is testimony-related content. This can include summaries or excerpts from depositions, formal statements given under oath outside of court. These sections provide insight into what individuals have said during the legal process. However, testimony can be challenged, clarified, or contested. Its presence in a filing does not mean it has been fully accepted without dispute. There is also the inclusion of legal arguments. Attorneys use filings to explain why the court should rule in a certain way. This includes interpreting evidence, applying legal standards, and responding to opposing claims. These arguments shape how the information is presented. Another key element is selectivity. Not all available information is included in filings. Legal teams choose what to present based on relevance and strategy. This means that the content reflects what is necessary for the case, not everything that exists in the broader context. There is also the issue of redaction and limitation. As discussed in earlier sections, some parts of filings may be partially hidden or omitted in public versions. This can affect how complete the content appears. Understanding this leads to an important distinction. The filings provide access to what was presented in court, but they do not represent a complete or final account of all underlying information. Another factor is context dependency. Individual excerpts or sections must be understood in relation to the full document and the broader case. Isolated passages may not convey their intended meaning without that context. This reinforces a central principle. Legal filings are structured documents with specific purposes, containing a mix of assertions, references, and arguments. They are not neutral summaries, they are part of an active legal process. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre do not stand on their own. Once submitted, they enter a process of judicial evaluation, where courts determine how the information should be understood within the legal framework. This evaluation is structured. Courts do not treat filings as final accounts. Instead, they assess them based on legal standards, procedural rules, and the interaction between opposing arguments. One of the first steps is review for admissibility. Judges consider whether the content of a filing meets the requirements to be considered in the case. This includes evaluating whether referenced materials are relevant, properly presented, and legally acceptable. Not all information passes this stage. Some elements may be limited, excluded, or given less weight depending on how they meet these criteria. Another important factor is opposition and response. Filings are not evaluated in isolation. Each claim or assertion is typically met with a response from the opposing side. These responses may challenge the accuracy, relevance, or interpretation of the information presented. This creates a dialogue within the record. The court considers both sides before forming a position on any particular issue. There is also the role of evidentiary weight. Not all information within a filing carries the same level of importance. Courts assess how strongly each piece of material supports a claim, taking into account its source, context, and consistency. This means that inclusion in a filing does not guarantee influence. Another key element is legal interpretation. Judges apply legal standards to the material presented. This involves determining how the information fits within the law, rather than simply accepting it at face value. This process can lead to refinement. Certain parts of a filing may be emphasized, while others may be set aside as less relevant or insufficiently supported. There is also the consideration of procedural context. A filing submitted at an early stage may be evaluated differently from one submitted later in the case. Early filings often establish claims, while later ones are assessed against a more developed body of evidence. Timing matters. Another important point is judicial neutrality. Courts are not advocates for either side. Their role is to evaluate the material presented and apply the law accordingly. This ensures that filings are assessed within a balanced and structured process. There is also the impact of rulings. Judicial decisions determine how filings influence the outcome of a case. A ruling may accept certain arguments, reject others, or limit how information can be used going forward. These decisions shape the final record. Understanding this evaluation process leads to a clear conclusion. The filings are not conclusions, they are inputs into a system of legal analysis and decision-making. Their meaning is defined not only by what they contain, but by how they are examined, challenged, and ruled upon within the court. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre were not always publicly accessible. Like many legal documents, they moved through a process that determined what would remain sealed and what would become visible to the public. This transition is critical. A document's existence within the court system does not automatically mean it is available for public review. Access depends on disclosure rules, court decisions, and legal motions. Initially, many filings are restricted. During active litigation, documents may be sealed or partially sealed to protect sensitive information, ensure fairness, or comply with legal requirements. This means that even though filings are part of the case, they are not immediately visible outside the legal system. Over time, this can change. Through a process known as unsealing, certain documents are released to the public. This often occurs after specific legal conditions are met, such as the conclusion of key proceedings, court rulings on disclosure requests, motions filed by parties seeking greater transparency. Each of these events can trigger a shift in visibility. However, unsealing does not always mean full access. As discussed in previous sections, released documents are often subject to redactions. This means that while the structure and portions of the content become visible, certain details remain hidden. This creates a partial record. The public gains access to the filings, but not necessarily to every element contained within them. Another important factor is versioning. A document may be released in multiple stages. An early version might contain extensive redactions, while a later version may reveal additional information as restrictions are lifted. This results in evolving visibility. Understanding a filing may require comparing different versions over time, rather than relying on a single release. There is also the role of public access systems. Once unsealed, filings are typically made available through official channels, allowing researchers, journalists, and the public to review them directly. This expands the audience beyond the courtroom. But access does not equal simplicity. Legal documents remain complex, even when publicly available. Their meaning still depends on context, structure, and interpretation. Another key point is selective exposure. Not all filings receive the same level of attention. Some documents become widely discussed, while others remain less visible, even though they are part of the same record. This can shape perception. Public understanding may focus on specific filings without fully integrating the broader set of documents. There is also the issue of timing. Documents released later may change how earlier filings are interpreted. New information can add context, clarify earlier statements, or shift the overall understanding of the case. This reinforces a central idea. The public record is not static, it is built over time through the release of documents under changing legal conditions. In summary, the filings became part of the public record through a controlled and staged process, shaped by legal rules and disclosure decisions. They are visible but not always complete, and their meaning continues to evolve as additional material becomes accessible. Once the filings associated with Virginia Giuffre became publicly accessible, they moved beyond the legal system into a broader space of analysis, commentary, and interpretation. This transition changes how the documents are understood. Inside the courtroom, filings are evaluated through legal standards and procedural rules. Outside the courtroom, they are read by a wider audience that may not operate within those same constraints. This creates a shift in perspective. Legal filings are structured documents with specific purposes, but when they enter public discussion, they are often interpreted as narratives, stories that attempt to explain what happened and why. Another important factor is selective focus. Public analysis often highlights particular sections, excerpts, or references within the filings. These selected elements may become central to discussion, even if they represent only a small portion of the overall record. This can create imbalanced visibility. Some parts of the filings receive significant attention, while others remain largely unexamined. There is also the issue of context compression. Legal documents are complex and detailed. When they are summarized for broader audiences, that complexity is often reduced. Key points are emphasized, while supporting detail may be minimized or omitted. This improves accessibility, but can reduce nuance. Another layer is interpretive variation. Different readers may draw different conclusions from the same material. Without the formal structure of legal evaluation, interpretation becomes more open-ended. This can lead to multiple parallel understandings of the same filings. There is also the influence of timing and sequence. As documents are released in stages, public interpretation evolves. Early reactions may be based on limited information, while later analysis incorporates additional context. This creates an ongoing process of reinterpretation. Another important point is the distinction between legal meaning and public meaning. In legal terms, filings represent arguments, evidence references, and procedural steps. In public discussion, however, they may be treated as direct accounts of events. This difference is significant. It affects how the information is perceived and how conclusions are drawn. There is also the role of cross-referencing. More detailed analysis often involves comparing multiple filings, identifying patterns, and placing information within a broader timeline. This approach can provide a more structured understanding, closer to how the material is handled within the legal system. However, not all interpretations follow this method. Another factor is visibility bias. Sections that are clear and unredacted are easier to discuss, while redacted or complex portions may receive less attention. This can shape which aspects of the filings become part of the public narrative. Understanding these dynamics leads to a key conclusion. The meaning of the filings is not fixed once they are released. It continues to evolve through interpretation, discussion, and comparison. But this interpretation exists outside the controlled environment of the courtroom. It reflects how structured legal material is translated into broader understanding. Within the filings associated with Virginia Giuffre, one of the most closely examined elements is the presence of names, references, and associations. These inclusions often draw attention, but their meaning depends heavily on context and legal function. At a basic level, names appear because they are part of the documented material. They may be included through testimony, communications, timelines, or other referenced evidence. However, their presence does not carry a single, fixed meaning. A name can appear in different roles. For example, an individual may be referenced as a participant in a communication, a subject mentioned in testimony, a point of reference within a timeline, a figure connected indirectly through association. Each role reflects a different type of inclusion. This leads to an important distinction. Inclusion does not equal conclusion. The presence of a name in a filing indicates that it is relevant to the material being presented at that moment, but it does not, on its own, establish legal responsibility or verified involvement. Another key factor is source dependency. Names often enter filings through specific sources, such as deposition testimony or documentary evidence. The reliability and interpretation of those sources can vary, and they are subject to challenge within the legal process. This means that names are part of a contested framework. There is also the issue of contextual framing. A name may appear alongside certain descriptions or events, but without the full context, its role may not be fully clear. Redactions or selective presentation can further limit understanding. This reinforces the need for careful reading. Another important point is frequency of appearance. Some names may appear repeatedly across multiple filings, while others may appear only once. Repetition can increase visibility, but it does not necessarily indicate greater importance. It may reflect how often a name is relevant to specific arguments or evidence. There is also the concept of association without direct linkage. In complex cases, individuals may be connected through networks of interactions, communications, or references. A name may appear as part of that network without being directly tied to the central issues being examined. This creates layered relationships. Understanding these relationships requires examining how names are used within the structure of the document, rather than viewing them in isolation. Another factor is legal caution. Courts and legal teams are aware of the implications of naming individuals. This influences how names are included, presented, or sometimes limited within filings. This adds another layer of selectivity. Understanding the role of names within the filings leads to a key conclusion. Names are elements within a structured legal narrative, not standalone indicators of meaning. Their significance depends on how they are introduced, supported, and interpreted within the broader context of the case. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre do not exist in isolation. Their full meaning often becomes clearer when they are viewed alongside other filings, related cases, and additional records. This creates a network of documents. Individual filings may reference materials from other proceedings, include excerpts from separate depositions, or align with timelines established elsewhere. These connections expand the scope of interpretation beyond any single document. Another important factor is cross-referencing. By comparing multiple filings, it becomes possible to identify how information appears in different contexts. A detail mentioned briefly in one document may be expanded in another, or presented from a different perspective. This process adds depth. It allows the material to be understood as part of a larger evidentiary and procedural structure. There is also the issue of case overlap. Different legal actions may address related topics but operate under separate scopes and objectives. As a result, the same individuals or events may appear across multiple cases, each time within a different framework. This leads to context variation. A reference in one case may serve a specific legal argument, while in another it may be used for a different purpose. Without recognizing these differences, it is easy to misinterpret how the information fits together. Another key element is document layering. Legal records build on one another. Earlier filings may establish a baseline, while later documents refine, challenge, or expand upon that material. This layered structure requires sequential reading to fully understand. There is also the role of supporting materials. Exhibits, transcripts, and referenced documents can connect filings to additional sources. These materials may contain further detail, but they are also subject to the same rules of relevance, admissibility, and redaction. This reinforces the complexity of the record. Another factor is consistency and discrepancy. When multiple documents address similar topics, they may align, or they may differ. Identifying where information is consistent and where it varies is an important part of analysis. However, differences do not automatically indicate contradiction. They may reflect different perspectives, stages of the case, or purposes of the document. There is also the challenge of incomplete linkage. Not all connections between documents are fully visible. Redactions, sealed materials, or missing context can limit how clearly these relationships can be traced. This creates partial visibility. Understanding these connections leads to a key conclusion. The filings gain meaning not only from what they contain individually, but from how they relate to a broader network of legal records. They are components of a larger system. The filings associated with Virginia Giuffre do not remain fixed in their meaning once they are released. Instead, they become part of an ongoing process of analysis, where interpretation develops over time as more context becomes available. At the moment of release, understanding is often initial and partial. Readers focus on newly visible material, identifying key sections and attempting to interpret their significance. However, this early stage rarely reflects the full complexity of the filings. Over time, deeper analysis begins. Researchers, legal observers, and analysts revisit the documents, comparing them with other filings, related cases, and additional records. This allows for a more structured and comprehensive understanding. This process leads to integration. Individual pieces of information are connected, timelines are clarified, and relationships between documents become more visible. What once appeared isolated may become part of a broader pattern. Another important factor is reinterpretation. As new documents are unsealed or additional material becomes available, earlier conclusions may be revised. Information that lacked context initially may gain clarity when viewed alongside later disclosures. This creates a dynamic system. Understanding is not static, it evolves as the available record expands. There is also the role of archival permanence. Once filings enter the public record, they remain accessible for future examination. This allows ongoing analysis to build on previous work, rather than starting from zero. This long-term availability is essential. It ensures that interpretation can continue beyond the immediate moment of public attention. Another key point is context expansion. Over time, filings may be compared with external sources, such as other legal proceedings, documented timelines, or additional disclosures. This broader context can enhance understanding, even if it does not resolve every question. However, limitations remain. Some information may never become fully visible due to redactions, sealed materials, or missing documentation. These gaps persist, shaping interpretation even in the long term. This leads to a balanced perspective. The filings provide valuable insight, but they do not provide a complete picture. Their significance lies in how they are analyzed, compared, and contextualized over time. Another important distinction is between legal outcome and informational value. A case may reach a resolution, but the filings can continue to inform discussion and analysis beyond that point. They add depth and detail to the understanding of the legal process itself. Understanding this leads to a key conclusion. The meaning of the filings is not defined at a single moment. It is developed through continuous examination and evolving context. After examining the structure, content, context, and interpretation of the filings associated with Virginia Giuffre, a clear conclusion emerges. These documents are not standalone revelations. They are components of a structured legal system that defines how information is presented, limited, and understood. They exist within a controlled framework. This framework is shaped by legal rules, procedural boundaries, and strategic decisions, all of which determine what enters the record and how it is expressed. At every stage, information is filtered. Through evidence, which determines what can be documented. Through relevance, which defines what is included. Through scope and jurisdiction, which limit what is examined. Through legal strategy, which shapes presentation. Through redactions and disclosure rules, which control visibility. Each layer narrows what becomes publicly accessible. This leads to a structured outcome. A partial but organized record, where some information is clearly visible, some is indirectly suggested, and some remains entirely hidden. Understanding this layered structure is essential. The filings show what was presented in court, but they do not necessarily show everything that exists beyond that framework. They reflect the legal process, not the entirety of all underlying events. Another key insight is the distinction between assertion and adjudication, presence and proof, visibility and completeness. Filings may include allegations, descriptions, and references, but their inclusion does not automatically establish legal confirmation. That determination comes through judicial evaluation, not through the filing itself. There is also the role of context and connection. As explored in earlier sections, the filings gain meaning through their position within specific cases, their relationship to other documents, their development over time, their interpretation both inside and outside the courtroom. Without this context, individual excerpts can be misunderstood. Another important factor is ongoing relevance. Even after legal proceedings conclude, the filings remain part of the public record. They continue to be examined, compared, and interpreted, contributing to long-term understanding. At the same time, limitations remain. Redactions, sealed materials, and procedural boundaries ensure that the record is not fully complete. Some information may remain permanently restricted. This is not a flaw, it is a feature of the legal system. Courts are designed to balance transparency with protection, allowing access where possible while maintaining necessary limits. In conclusion, the filings associated with Virginia Giuffre should be understood as structured legal documents, created for specific purposes, partial representations, shaped by rules and limitations, context-dependent records, requiring careful interpretation, components of a broader legal system, not isolated narratives. They do not provide final answers, but they offer a framework for understanding how information is introduced, examined, and preserved within the legal process. And within that framework, they reveal something deeper. Not just details about a case, but how the legal system itself organizes, filters, and defines what becomes part of the public record. The documents exist. The questions remain. This channel will continue examining what is public, and what is still hidden. If you value documented analysis over speculation, consider subscribing. More files coming.